Fancy meeting you here. Did you find me all on your own, or did the algorithm find me for you? What can I say? We've painted ourselves into a cozy little corner where technological powers beyond our mortal comprehension are building the culture engulfing us. And who are we to argue with the zeros and ones that understand us better than we could ever understand ourselves? I'm a busy man. I don't have time to hunt down cute cat videos and long-forgotten jazz fusion records all on my own. The internet is such a dense desert, and more content is cranked out every day than any of us could consume in a lifetime. Why wouldn't I want the algorithm to take my fleshy hand, guide me glazed-eyed and slack-jawed to everything that it can mathematically deduce will tickle my dopamine receptors? I must admit, though, after a decade existing exclusively on the receiving side of the algorithm's unknowable women fancy, a certain level of dread has seeped in, suddenly being subject to the equation's other end. All I'm able to do is package this record up real pretty and chuck it into the abyss with crossed fingers. No label, no budget, no pre-existing online influence. All there is to do is click some buttons, grab a beer, and wait. If you're here listening to me ramble, that must mean that the almighty algorithm has deemed me worthy of your attention. Praise be. So sit back, relax, and know that this record has been specially selected from an incalculable pool of options for your optimal listening pleasure. Enjoy. If tomorrow I wake up and Reuters, the AP, and the BBC are all reporting that extraterrestrials have landed in St. Louis and have expressed their intention to exterminate humanity, am I still expected to show up at my 2 p.m. shift at work? Seems like it would be a real drag, inevitably being the bearer of bad news for people whose bosses didn't want to share and see a dip in productivity. How long would the apocalypse take to make the 1,000-mile trek to my neck of the woods? Usually we're running 5 to 10 years behind the times of any major metropolitan area, but that seems like it would be an optimistic estimation in this instance. I'd give it 3, maybe 4 days, aided by the fact that even galaxy-traversing tourists, bound to get gawking at the pandemonium of Connecticut's narrow highways and the George Washington Bridge. How do you start a casual conversation with that news hanging in the air? Hey man, certain death is upon us, it's been a good run. You still feel confident with your cabinet full of guns? I bet there'd be a sweet 36-hour period where everybody's TikTok feed would be nothing but alien decapitation videos and tactical armor try-on hauls. Everybody would be enamored by some reality show contestants on an isolated island, and the fact that they still weren't aware that we were facing our imminent demise. I wonder how many people would be momentarily fooled into thinking this was the long-awaited return of their lost religious prophet. I worry about anybody who happened to be a little too high at the Gateway Arch as the first ships landed. I'd watch Fox News, just waiting for Lindsey Graham to say that lax border control laws are to blame, and I'd watch ESPN just to see Stephen A. Smith explaining how this whole situation would impact the DraftKings odds on the Packers-Jets game Monday night. When civilization reaches the endgame, I intend to go about my day and watch the thin fabric of our society fray like a dollar store sock from the comfort of my phone. For the first time in a long time, I won't begrudgingly care about the Dow Jones Index or whether or not my car's always made that noise when the radio's off. I won't be worried about my career trajectory or the unusually mild winters we've been having, and I'll savor the scarce tranquility found in staring down the void. I'll clear my schedule, do the final few wordles, and sit in blissful silence drinking scotch I can't really afford on my deck. I'll be wearing a satisfied smile when the aliens turn the corner on me. I have 91 contacts saved in my phone, and they're mostly the wrong ones. I'm not much of a phone guy, and I have a bad habit of being reluctant to save a number that I don't intend to hear from again, even if I end up doing so repeatedly. So these were at one point in time all relevant individuals that I had good reason to want to keep in touch with. It's the end of March, and so far this year, I've talked to 31 of them. I have the number of this guy I met within the first month of moving to town who is tangentially involved with the minuscule music scene that exists here. He was going to keep an eye out for sound gigs for me. 7 years in, still at 0. Every once in a while I think about reaching out, but at this point I'd struggle to run a soundboard, and the scene's even smaller now than it was back then. got the guy who ran sound at my parents' old church and my bar's pinball repairman. I've got my wife's grandfather, my landlord's son, and a guy that did my taxes years ago. I've got this guy who, right before the pandemic, rolled into town over Thanksgiving to take care of his sickly grandmother. I invited him over to my apartment for Thanksgiving dinner. Everybody had a good time, and not too long afterwards, he went back to Chicago, never to be heard from again. Every once in a while, I think about reaching out, but at this point, all I can lead with is, how's your grandmother doing? And I don't like those odds. I've got a few aunts, but somehow zero uncles and a coworker that left us to join a cult. I've got the woman who helped my wife and I plan our wedding and my bass teacher from college. I've got multiple liquor brand reps, my boss and his brother, and some guy that wanted to hire me for a job in finance a few years ago before I went on a fairly anti-corporate, anti-capitalist rant during my 5th round of interviews. Not only did I not get the job, but I believe they eliminated the position entirely. I've got one of my favorite musicians who rolled through town last year to play at a non-denominational church right off campus. I emailed him like 3 days beforehand to say, hey, I'm a big fan and I run a restaurant in the tiny-ass town you're about to play in. Can I buy you and your crew lunch to help offset the gas it's going to take to make it this far north? And he said, yes, absolutely. Please text me where and when. Every once in a while I think about reaching out, but I manage to avoid being burnt by the adage of don't meet your heroes, and I feel like don't casually text them should be implied. I've got my wife in my phone as Bean Square. I've got 3 different friends with their partner's name in parentheses so as to differentiate them from somebody else with the same name. And a guy I know from Twitch has the username I assume he made up when he was a teenager. And to end on a twofer, I've got both the home and cell numbers of my late grandmother. Every once in a while I think about reaching out, but I have no idea what I'd do if somebody picked up. I did it. I've made it. I've earned my summer supply of pizza and pool parties because I've left my hometown and I'm not looking back. Except sometimes people get married, sometimes people die, sometimes it's just been too damn long since you've seen the small handful of people in that town worth seeing. As far as I know, no pop-punk band ever bothered to dial back in and write the sophomore album retrospective on how to handle your hometown after you've successfully shuffled the digits of your zip code. Any way you slice it, it costs me hundreds of dollars and dozens of travel hours every time I make the trek back. If I can spare less than a week away, it becomes a logistical nightmare, and unfortunately, I've become a man with very few spare weeks. Every meaningful event happening in that town and all the other towns that I traversed in my formative years land on the cold scales of value analysis. It's incredible what tips immediately into the concept shredder without a second thought. Every year I miss birthdays and graduations and holiday get-togethers, and at this point they barely register as anything other than stoic non-viables. Every time somebody stuck in my hometown dies, I have to sit and think. Not grieve, just think. How much did this person really matter to me? Were they integral or just ever-present? Would they even want me to go through the effort just to put on an uncomfortable necktie and sit in a room full of sad people I barely know anymore? Often I just write a nice card and then let it rot on my kitchen counter because I don't know where to send it, and I don't remember to ask anybody until it's been so long that it would be a less sympathetic homage and more uncouth reminder of loss. I'm 2 tanks of gas away from everybody I knew for the first 2 decades of my life, and most days that's okay. I've found some truth in the abstract promises of faraway places, and I've succeeded where many others only dream and tunefully yearn. But I'm here to ask why hometown-averse pop-punk records never have a deluxe edition with a poster and 3 bonus tracks where the singer puts their money where their mouth is, skips town, and reports back a year later. Give me a song about all the new friends and new favorite places you made in your new town, a song about the joyous freedom of making a life of your own on your own, and one final track dejectedly sitting on your couch holding a save-the-date to an old friend's wedding, struggling to decide which way the scales tip. My hot conspiratorial take is that plastering "do not eat" on silica gel packets causes more silica gel to be consumed per capita than if they were produced sans warning. To the destructively anti-authority driven mind, do not eat is a challenge. Do not eat is a deception. Do not eat is the global elite trying to deny the working man a tasty snack, his God-given right for finally saving up enough to buy a new pair of shoes, some overpriced beef jerky. Over 1,000 cases of silica gel consumption are reported each year, and I bet we could drop that number close to 0 if we came up with a warning, didn't swing the door open and invite the intrusive thoughts in for dinner. Warning, consumption will make you 20% less charismatic for 1 year. Warning, consumption will drive your most annoying acquaintance to reach out with plans and not take no for an answer. Warning, tastes just like the yams your aunt brought to Thanksgiving when she was on her health kick. Sup the sugar for Truvia. You had to eat some anyway so she didn't have a meltdown like the year prior when nobody touched her poorly pickled okra. Something that I took for granted throughout my degenerate adolescent haze is that I wasn't thinking too hard about the details as I left for a house party. Shoes on, 4 Loko in each hand, and out the door with the carefree, vacant headspace of a man who knows everything else is God's problem so long as he can stomach watching. Nowadays, I need at least an hour, if not a full day of contemplative preparation. Come on over for board game night, rings a different timbre from host to host. Do I show up with a rack of High Lifes for myself, a bottle of wine as a gift, or will I be the only heathen who assumed that catching a buzz might make eels and escalators more interesting? Is this a buttons on the shirt kind of shindig? Do I need a jacket and do I need to worry about there being a safe spot to store it? Is there a viable escape plan if the vibes are off and my social batteries depleted within the first hour? Does 6 o'clock actually mean 6 o'clock, or will I be the first one there stuck making an hour of awkward small talk while the host finishes setting up? I wish I had these answers, but alas, it's already 6:30. I've made my most educated assumptions. Now it's time to grab a shower before I hit the road. Godspeed. A decade ago, back when my now wife was my then fledgling fling, she convinced me to go to something called the Great Inflatable Race. We frolicked through a field for a few hours, slid down some slides, and hopped over some flimsy facades amongst a confusing fusion of young runts and run nuts. It was a good time, no notes, except for the fact they insisted on giving us these cheesy little medals when we crossed the finish line. I cannot stress enough how much we did not need nor earn medals that day. We were not fast, we weren't graceful. I believe at one point we were lapped by a 10-year-old in jorts. But for some reason, despite the passage of nearly a decade and multiple moves hundreds of miles up the coast, these baubles bereft of benefit have survived buried at the bottom of my bedroom's endless junk bin. One day, while searching hopelessly through said bin for a long-lost SD card reader, I grabbed one of the medals and my brain short-circuited. Here I had an object in my hand that I did not want, I didn't need, and for some reason I could not bring myself to throw away. I imagine myself decades from now, unpacking my musty things into a musty room at the old folks' home, wondering why the medals had made the cut for yet another move, and secretly struggling to remember where exactly they had come from in the first place. After I was dead and gone, the estate sale crew would chuck the medals into the dumpster without so much as a second thought. I went down to the kitchen, metal still in hand, into yet another junk drawer and grabbed an old pair of safety scissors. I chopped the ribbon into small strips and watched the fringe of its cheap polyester fray. I went back upstairs to my closet and reached for the bottom of my pile of nearly identical jeans, a stack of black denim organized in descending stages of degradation. Months ago, I had reached a point where I was exclusively cycling between the top 3 pairs, each of which only bore their original 3 holes, plus a tastefully blown-out right knee, in comparison to the unseemly windows to more intimate fabric that were present in the rest. I brought the most decimated pair down and pulled them inside out. I took my newly liberated strips of ribbon and started measuring them against the various rips and slits that I'd procured over the years that I'd managed to avoid clothes shopping. I began making makeshift patches and sewing them over each imperfection. My first patch was loose and haphazard and fell off after its first trip through the wash, but after a few stoned evenings spent music in ear and needle in hand, I started to get the hang of it. My pace improved, the stitching got tighter, and over the course of a few weeks I suddenly had more jeans at my disposal than I'd ever need. Hopefully I can put off clothes shopping for a few more years. clothing industry is valued at over $250 billion annually, less than 3% of which is manufactured domestically due to severely inequitable labor markets and rampant human rights violations. This is only possible and profitable because of the expectation that every human being perpetually cycle their wardrobe with the smallest sign of wear, defect, or fleeting trend. We as consumers wield an incredible amount of collective power to choose what industries must change their unjust and unsustainable practices. We can crumble corporations with a little more ingenuity, a little less ego, and a few spools of thread. George Washington or Thomas Jefferson had ever come face to face with a modern automatic assault rifle, I bet they'd have been a bit more selective with the verbiage of the Second Amendment. All too often, gun nuts argue that you can't legislate based on discharge rate or cartridge size because they aren't explicitly mentioned in the Constitution, but something tells me these two phrases weren't at the front of the Founding Fathers' colloquial vernacular. At the very least, they led with their phallic undertones. For a voting bloc to tend to enjoy the aesthetics of some weathered We the People paper adorning their t-shirts and truck windows, I'd expect a bit more consideration to be taken toward the state of affairs that is penning. I'm not saying that I'd be any less dead to a Brown Bess versus a Smith & Wesson, but I feel a bit better knowing Captain Shoot-'em-Up would be spending this song's runtime reloading. Today at my bar, I had a kid ask quite indignantly for somebody 3 feet tall for a glass of mango juice. I do not have mango juice at my bar, nor do I know who I'd contact if I were to suddenly have a need to start stocking mango juice. For the theoretical reality where yesterday's Negroni Spagliato becomes tomorrow's mango mojito. Nah, we've got orange, cranberry, pineapple, grapefruit, and fresh lime if you're feeling feisty, but no mango. I receive a scowl, the likes of which I've never seen from somebody potty-trained post-Pinterest and Paul Wall. Where did this kid acquire a penchant for mango juice anyway? I can't recall ever running into mango juice out in the wild. It never crossed my mind that mango juice was even an option, let alone something for which to yearn. I had so many questions for his father, who sat there with a parental shrug of kids, am I right? I'll take the West Coast IPA and he'll have an orange juice. Sorry, he's really into mangoes right now. As the pair sat there with their newly acquired beverages, the kid's scowl slowly morphed into a reluctant placation, but I have no doubt that he spent every sip unenthused by the contents of his glass. No second rounds were requested and they were out the door before I could even wave them goodbye. I'm tempted to keep mango juice on hand from now on, just in case the miniature mango maniac ever makes a return. But with my luck, by then he'd have a hankering for huckleberry or guava, or some mysterious melon only cultivated in the mountains of Morocco, a palate matured far beyond the mild manner of the meager mango.
As I'm sure will be readily apparent by the end of this sentence, I'm sick as shit. Day 4 of the flu and I've already produced my body's weight in used tissues and discarded tea bags. Taken enough NyQuil that the viscous texture and exotic but potentially poisonous berry flavor is locked in my brain, and every time I take a sip, my headspace has been singularly focused on how I could use it as the base for a tiki drink. Find beverage to sip while bedridden and cold, imagining a beach and sun that under normal circumstances would sound wholly unappetizing. Get yourself a tall pint glass or a whimsical mug shaped like a psychedelic Easter Island head if you'll be posting your abomination online. Grab a shaker, drop some ice in it, and start with a solid 1.5 ounces of your nectar de knockout. Add in 3 ounces of pineapple juice and 1 of orange. Juice half a lime, or just go the vermouth and a martini method. Think really hard about lime juice if your frail body withered at the notion of operating a hand juicer. I'm not inherently advocating for the addition of booze to this, but I'm adding 3 dashes of Angostura bitters in my recipe. So if I'm ever 3 dashes of Angostura bitters away from death, please let me die. Shake it until you're halfway to passed out, then dump it right into your glass, because something tells me that dirty ice isn't going to be the make or break point of this concoction. Dust a little nutmeg or cinnamon on top to taste, then to distract yourself from the drink's unsettling cauldron-esque hue, pop in the closest simulacrum you have on hand to a paper umbrella, unless that would entail a real umbrella, which would probably knock your drink right on over. Pop in 2 straws for maximum airflow and minimal lingering on the palate. All that's left to do is return to your assigned seat, buckle yourself in, wait for that sweet, sweet drip of medicated unconsciousness to take flight. Maybe if you follow these notes to perfection, you'll actually be able to breathe out of both nostrils tomorrow and take less than a minute to make it down the stairs. I don't know if the playlist is too short or I just have impeccable timing, but at least once a week I hear Live Like You Were Dying by Tim McGraw while using the bathroom at work. What can I say? Some of us just catch all the breaks. After about the 200th listen or so, the tone at which I hear the song has shifted. This song that has thoroughly saturated popular culture and made Mr. McGraw millions. It's just a guy oversharing and then saying he hopes you get terminally ill. Sure, it comes with a softening, optimistic tone and a digestible major key, but it boils down to nearly 5 minutes of somebody, too unimportant to the narrator to give an opening signifier beyond the amorphous he, wishing you could experience the supposed joys of impending death. Be very careful not to mistake an optimistic tone for a positive outlook. Those in power can guide you to the reactions they want to elicit by selectively sharing the information that they have. Don't let somebody convince you that a stoic march towards death is a light, pleasant hike just because they have a cheery or confident demeanor. They likely stand to lose nothing when you finally arrive. Be vigilant and be thoughtful, because the march is never far off the horizon. Do not, under any circumstances, live like you are dying.
Not that I in any way view this as a viable goal worth striving towards, but there's something quaint about the fact that if I ever wanted to put in the work, follow some trends, get on TikTok, maybe add in a catchy chorus to the neurotic formula I've got cooking here to become my state's all-time best-selling musical artist, I'm not competing with the likes of the Eagles or Mariah Carey, but one Mr. Howie Day. I bring up this factoid every chance that I get, and the two responses I hear most often are a sudden name recognition when I hit him with a poorly hummed do, or some more drawn-out variation of, oh yeah, I used to live down the street from his aunt. None of this is a knock against the man. Collide is a perfectly executed pop song, and the rest of his discography honestly deserves more reverence than it receives. It's a knock against the very logistics of becoming a professional musician in the state of Maine and a lack of access to the resources that can jumpstart a career in the music industry here. Let me explain as somebody who pulled a reverse pop punk and moved from the outskirts of a very big city to a small, culturally isolated town. Granted, that small, culturally isolated town also happens to be one of Maine's biggest cities, but after having both, count them, 1, 2, of our post-COVID small-cap music venues closed within a month of each other, we are once again left with random one-off shows at coffee shops and progressive churches, and one monolithic amphitheater which gives us a dozen or so concerts a year, mostly catering to the state's two core demographics, guys with Salt Life stickers on the back of their Dodge Rams, and guys with Punisher stickers on the back of their F-150s. If you live here and you start a band, your options to get a gig are either drive 2+ hours south, or hope you have a cool uncle with a power-supplied barn and a whole lot of friends. Not exactly ideal conditions for nurturing a homegrown scene. I can't really be surprised that our venues keep closing. During college, I ran sound at a spot in a similarly sized city in Pennsylvania for a few years before I moved out here, and it thrived. In no small part because if a band had a show in Philadelphia one day, and one in Baltimore or New York or DC a few days later, we could throw them a couple $100 in a bar tab to stop by in between, and they'd be ecstatic to do so. People would come by in droves every night of the week without even knowing who was playing, just because they knew there'd be a good show and a good vibe, and it could very well be more entertaining than sitting at home on their phone. Soon enough, those people were starting their own bands and opening the shows themselves. The scene built upon itself, and it was thriving by the time I left. I wouldn't be surprised if a few of the bands I worked with in those days have outsold Howie Day by now. But you know what a less appealing offer is? Hey, I know your tour doesn't go past Boston, but would you like to drive another 6 hours north on a bland stretch of I-95 into the middle of relative nowhere to play to a dozen or so people in the basement of our local Thai restaurant? I can maybe cover your gas depending on how fuel efficient your van is. It's a non-viable offer. I learned 100 life lessons and have 10 times as many explanatory anecdotes that all revolve around being a shithead teenager a short, unsupervised train ride away from 100 different concerts a night, and later on being a shithead teenager driving a shitty teenage Buick Century filled with twice as Blue Book value in musical equipment to the sketchiest parts of the PA tri-state area you can imagine, just to scream songs at people about being a snarky shithead teenager. The shithead teenagers here don't have that same access, and it shows in our musical GDP. But this is my home now, and I never want to go back.
It's peaceful here, the beer's world class and the rent's cheap. I'm blessed to live in the age of the all-powerful internet where I can tap into every facet of music that the world has to offer so long as I know where to look. I might not be able to roll out of bed on my day off and decide which of 100 shows I want to go to anymore, but I can still pick out any album ever recorded that I want to hear, and it's just there at my disposal. I hope people don't lose sight of how unbelievable a concept that would have been even a generation ago. I've got an entire music scene that exists within the confines of my bedroom, and for the time being, that's going to have to be enough. Who knows, maybe the scant silver lining to our incoming techno-capitalist hellscape is that the shithead teenagers will have a chance to hear and be heard no matter how small and isolated their town is. Everybody here is only one hit away from being the biggest act the state's ever known.